lost, hopeless. The woods had him now, each tree a looming giant, branches, skeletal fingers reaching out, pulling him deeper into darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, he was sinking. His heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drum in the stillness. Every snap, every rustle sent chills down his spine. He was prey, hunted. The forest held its breath, waiting. He stumbled forward, desperate for a sign, a path, anything familiar. But the trees pressed in, suffocating him with their silence. He was trapped, ensnared in the wood's malevolent embrace. And night was coming. Through the dense undergrowth, a shape emerged, gray, cold, unnatural. It was a concrete structure, half buried in the earth like a forgotten secret. A bunker. Hope flickered, a fragile flame in the gathering darkness. He approached cautiously, each step heavy with trepidation. The air around the structure felt different, colder, stiller, as if the forest itself shunned this place. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the rough surface. A shiver ran up his arm. This place held a secret, he could feel it. The heavy metal door creaked open, a groan of protest after years of silence. The stench hit him first, damp, earthy, with a metallic tang that made his stomach churn. The air inside was thick, heavy, laced with the taste of fear. He fumbled for his flashlight, the beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. Dust motes danced in the pale light, swirling like tiny ghosts. Cobwebs, thick and gray, hung from every corner. A sense of dread washed over him. This was not a sanctuary, it was a tomb. The silence inside the bunker was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. It was a silence that seemed to have a weight of its own, pressing down on him from all sides. The darkness was so complete that it felt like a living entity, wrapping around him, making it hard to breathe. He could feel the cold, damp air seeping into his bones, chilling him to the core. Every breath he took was a struggle, each inhale and exhale echoing in the confined space, amplifying his sense of isolation and fear. It pressed in on him, suffocating him. The walls seemed to close in, the ceiling felt lower with each passing second. He could almost hear the whispers of the past, the ghosts of those who had been here before him. Their silent screams seemed to merge with his own thoughts, creating a cacophony of fear and despair. He tried to steady his breathing, to calm his racing heart, but the oppressive silence made it impossible. Every creak of his boots on the concrete floor seemed to echo endlessly. The sound bounced off the walls, creating an eerie symphony that only heightened his sense of dread. Each step he took was deliberate, cautious, as if he was afraid of disturbing the malevolent spirits that seemed to inhabit the darkness. The floor beneath him felt uneven, as if it could give way at any moment, plunging him into an even deeper abyss. He strained to hear anything over the pounding of his own heart. The rhythmic thumping in his chest was a constant reminder of his vulnerability, his humanity. He listened intently, hoping to catch any sound that might indicate he was not alone. But the silence was unbroken, save for the occasional drip of water from the ceiling, a sound that seemed to mock his desperation. He moved deeper into the bunker, each step hesitant, as if expecting the floor to give way beneath him. The further he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew colder, the darkness more impenetrable. He could feel the weight of the earth above him, the crushing reality of his isolation. Every step was a battle against his own fear, a test of his resolve. The air grew colder, the smell more pungent. It was a foul, acrid odor that seemed to cling to his skin, to invade his senses. He gagged, covering his mouth and nose with his hand, but the smell was inescapable. It was the smell of decay, of death, a reminder of the countless lives that had been lost in this forsaken place. He tried to push the thought from his mind, to focus on the task at hand, but the smell was a constant, nagging presence. He ran his hand along the damp wall, his fingers tracing the outline of something etched in the darkness. The surface was cold and slick, covered in a thin layer of moisture. As his fingers moved over the rough texture, he felt the distinct lines of a symbol, a mark that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He couldn't see it, but he could feel its presence. A silent testament to the horrors that had taken place here. A symbol? A warning? He couldn't be sure. The darkness played tricks on his mind, making it hard to distinguish reality from illusion. He shone his flashlight on the wall, revealing the faint outline of the etching. It was a crude, almost primitive design, but it carried a weight, a significance that he couldn't ignore. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sense of foreboding that made him question his decision to venture into this place. but the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. He was being watched. He could feel eyes on him, a presence that lurked just beyond the edge of the light. He turned, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just the oppressive silence, the suffocating darkness. He was alone, but he wasn't. The bunker was alive with the memories of the past, with the echoes of those who had come before him, and they were watching. Section 5. Shadows danced on the wall. The flashlight flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the bunker walls. The air was thick with tension, every flicker of light creating grotesque shapes that seemed to move and twist on their own. The bunker, once a place of refuge, now felt like a trap, its concrete walls closing in with every passing second. He shook it, his heart hammering in his chest. Each shake was more desperate than the last, the fear of being swallowed by the darkness, growing with every failed attempt. The flashlight was his only lifeline, the only thing keeping the encroaching shadows at bay. He couldn't be left in darkness, not here, in this forsaken place where every sound was amplified, every creak and groan of the bunker echoing like a sinister whisper. The darkness was not just an absence of light, it was a presence, a living entity that seemed to breathe and watch. Not here, not now. His mind raced, thoughts colliding in a chaotic frenzy. Memories of stories he'd heard about this place, tales of lost souls and unseen horrors flooded his mind. He had always dismissed them as mere legends, but now, in the suffocating darkness, they felt all too real. The battery sputtered, then died. The finality of it was like a death knell, the last vestige of hope snuffed out in an instant. He was left with nothing but the oppressive blackness and the sound of his own ragged breathing. He was plunged into absolute blackness. It was as if the world had ceased to exist, leaving him in a void where time and space had no meaning. The silence was deafening, broken only by the pounding of his heart and the occasional drip of water from the bunker ceiling. Panic surged through him, cold and sharp. It was a primal fear, one that clawed at his sanity and threatened to overwhelm him. He could feel the walls closing in, the darkness pressing down on him like a physical weight. He fumbled for his lighter, his fingers trembling so badly he could barely flick the wheel. Each failed attempt sent a jolt of terror through him, the fear of being consumed by the darkness growing with every passing second. The lighter was his last hope, a fragile beacon in the overwhelming night. A tiny flame sparked to life, a fragile beacon in the overwhelming darkness. It was small, almost insignificant, but it was enough to push back the shadows, if only for a moment. The flickering light cast eerie shadows on the walls, revealing the stark, cold reality of the bunker. It illuminated only a small circle, revealing nothing but the oppressive concrete walls and the dust-choked air. The light was weak, barely enough to see by, but it was a lifeline, a small comfort in the overwhelming darkness. He could see the dust motes dancing in the air, illuminated by the fragile flame, but he could feel it now, a presence. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, watching him, waiting. Every nerve in his body was on edge, every instinct screaming at him to run, to escape. But there was nowhere to go, no way out of the suffocating blackness. Something was with him in the darkness. It was a feeling, a certainty that he was not alone. The shadows seemed to move, to shift and coalesce into something almost human. He could feel its eyes on him, cold and unblinking, watching his every move. The darkness was no longer just an absence of light, it was a presence, a living entity that seemed to breathe and watch. Section 6. A glimmer in the dark. He stumbled forward, desperate to escape the suffocating darkness. His foot caught on something, sending him sprawling. As he lay there, heart pounding, he noticed a faint glimmer in the distance. Hope, like a lifeline, pulled him towards it. He crawled toward the light, his hands scraping on the rough concrete floor. The air grew warmer, the metallic tang replaced by something else, a sweet, cloying scent. It reminded him of something from his childhood. He couldn't quite place it. Section 7. Etched in dust, he reached the source of the light, a single lantern hanging from a rusty hook. It illuminated a small room, bare except for a cot and a wooden table. On the table, a book lay open, its pages yellowed with age, but it was the wall that held his gaze. Scrawled across its surface were strange symbols and diagrams, etched in what appeared to be blood. The sight sent a shiver down his spine. This wasn't the work of a lost hiker. This was something else, something sinister. Section 8. A cold embrace. He reached out to touch one of the symbols, drawn to its macabre beauty. As his fingers brushed the dried blood, he felt a sudden rush of cold air. The lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. He turned to run, but it was too late. Something grabbed him from behind, its grip like ice. He struggled, but it was no use. He was pulled back against a cold, hard chest. A raspy voice whispered in his ear, the words sending chills down his spine. "Welcome home." Section 9. Not alone. The lantern finally sputtered and died, plunging him into darkness once more. The forest around him seemed to close in, the trees whispering secrets he couldn't understand. He felt a chill run down his spine, the kind that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He had been walking for hours, the path ahead barely visible in the dim light. Now, without the lantern, he was utterly blind. He was enveloped in the cold embrace, the scent of decay filling his nostrils. The forest floor was littered with decaying leaves, each step he took crunching underfoot. The fog hung low, wrapping around him like a shroud. He could hear the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. Every sound was amplified in the silence, making his heart race faster. He could feel the thing's breath on his neck, hot and fetid. It was as if the darkness itself had come alive, breathing down his neck, watching his every move. He dared not turn around, fearing what he might see. His breath came in short, ragged gasps, each one a struggle against the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume him. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. His mind raced with thoughts of what might happen next. Would it be quick? Would he feel pain? He tried to brace himself, to prepare for the inevitable. The darkness seemed to press in on him from all sides, suffocating him with its weight. But the end didn't come. Instead, there was a moment of stillness, a pause in the oppressive atmosphere. He opened his eyes, half expecting to see the creature looming over him. But there was nothing, just the darkness and the cold. He felt a strange sense of relief mixed with confusion. Why had it spared him? Instead, he felt something cold and metallic pressed against his skin. It was an odd sensation, almost grounding in its reality. He reached up, his fingers trembling, and touched the object. It was smooth and cool to the touch, a stark contrast to the warmth of his skin. He could feel the intricate details of the metal, the way it seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. He opened his eyes and looked down. The darkness made it difficult to see, but he could just make out the shape of the object. It was hanging from a thin chain, glinting faintly in the dim light. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what it was. It was a necklace, a silver pendant dangling from a thin chain. The pendant was intricately designed, with a symbol etched into its surface. He held it up, letting it catch what little light there was. The symbol seemed to glow faintly, as if it held some kind of power. He recognized the symbol etched into its surface. It was the same one he had seen earlier, carved into the stone wall of the ancient ruins. A symbol of power, of belonging. He felt a strange connection to it, as if it was calling out to him. The same symbol from the wall. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. He was no longer just a wanderer in the forest. He was part of something much larger, something ancient and powerful. The symbol was a mark of initiation, a sign that he had been chosen. He was one of them now. The forest no longer seemed as threatening. It was as if the trees themselves were welcoming him, their whispers now words of encouragement. He felt a surge of confidence, a newfound sense of purpose. He was not alone. He had never been alone. The forest was his home, and